Aloha kako. Welcome to the hearing for the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems. Today is February 1st, 9:45 a.m. and we are convening in room 325. Today we have with us Vice Chair Kahaloa, Reps Cochran, and no one else. Okay. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some brief housekeeping rules. There is a 2-minute time limit per testifier in order to allow as many people to testify as possible. In the interest of time, if you have submitted testimony on time, our committee has received it. If you wish to present oral testimony, please summarize your written testimony. For testifiers attending on Zoom, please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. Please use the Zoom chat function for technical issues only. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from hearing without the ability to rejoin. Lastly, if time permits, we will offer the opportunity for walk-in testimony. For those who would like to testify in person but did not sign up, please make sure to provide your contact information to the clerk sitting on our right against the wall. We will now begin the hearing. The bills set forth on the agenda, and the first bill we have is HB 307 relating to agriculture park leases. First testifier we have is the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. Law Director.
Good morning, Chairperson Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, and members of the committee. The department supports this bill with comment. The bill is to extend the agricultural leases when they have, well, to consider the extension of the lease when they're 15 years from being terminated. The bill accommodates the new farmers. They give everybody a chance to take a swing at it, submit your application. But we also want to say that the existing farmers that have been on the land will also have a chance to submit their plan to continue their successful business operations. The team that we have here, subject matter experts, they're going to make an evaluation based on, are you using the land in the manner that it was intended to be used? And if so, we want you to continue your successful business operation. At least you will have a chance to compete with everyone else's application. The lands that will be, so to speak, to turn over available will be based on a reassessment of the land values based on some assessments that are third party as well as internal. And if there is a need to increase the lease rents, everyone would be subject to that new lease. It's not as though if you're on the land that you have a grandfathered in amount. An important point is that this bill only affects those areas that are outside of the city and county of Honolulu proper with populations of less than 500,000, so it would be your area. And there are quite a lot of people on the wait list. I think Administrator Brian Cow from the Agricultural Resource Management Division, they estimate 234 people on the wait list waiting for lands. Now, this includes people from Honolulu City and County, so I wouldn't know how much of that. We think 70% from that is Honolulu. So we support the bill.
Okay. Thank you, Director. I will be asking questions at the later on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Good morning, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, members of the Agriculture Committee. My name is Brian Miyamoto. I'm here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau, and I heard you. I will try to stand on mostly every other bill. But this bill is critically important. It's one of the Farm Bureau package initiatives and priorities, and we're glad to hear what the director has said about their support. Last year, the legislature passed HB 1705. This exact bill. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed the bill, so we do stand in strong support. You do have a written testimony, but I'd just like to highlight a few things that was the reasons why the governor had vetoed the bill. First, the Ag Park program is meant to be a startup program for new farmers and other small farmers operations to become commercially viable. We agree with this, and we absolutely support small farmers. But why are we ignoring our successful farmers who are already on the land, who have succession plans, who want to continue to farm, who are currently producing? We need new farmers. And that's why the Farm Bureau supports the legislative effort to purchase private lands in agriculture that potentially could be developed. In fact, we support the department's request for $30 million for the Kunia Ag Park to develop more ag parks, not just on Oahu, but across the state, so we have more land for our new farmers. There's current wait list of over 200 applicants for new leases in ag parks. You heard the director talk about that. Again, Oahu is not included. Oahu is the majority of the wait list. Upwards of 70%, we believe, are on that wait list for ag park parcels, but it is for Oahu. Again, we should be finding new ag parks for farmers, new locations, not displacing those who are successfully farming right now. Number 3, the governor said the bill extends old leases by another 30 years, and that extension could be repeated indefinitely, essentially granting close to fee simple ownership of these lands. This is not necessarily true. The bill says that the department may extend the lease, not shall. I'll wrap up. So it is a may. Department, you heard what the director says, they can determine whether or not these farmers should continue on these ag park leases. However, we've already seen precedents set with DNR being allowed to extend leases on public lands for commercial, industrial, resort, or mixed use. Why is it good for those types of businesses and not for farmers? And that was Act 236 of Session Law 2021. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have on the list is Local Food Coalition.
Aloha, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahalo, and members of the committee. Kendo Matsuyoshi on behalf of the Local Food Coalition. We'll stand on our written testimony in support. And again, just reiterate the Farm Bureau's points that, again, it only affects the neighbor islands. And the department may is not a shall thing. So thank you very much.
Mahalo for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii. In support, we have HCIA.
Chair, we stand on our testimony in support.
Thank you. Okay. Noting that that was the last person that identified they would be in person to testify, we have Hawaii Cattlemen's Council in support. We have HFNA in support. And we have the Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii in support. Thank you. We also have 3 individuals in support. With that being said, is there anyone else wishing to testify on HB 307? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions? Rep. Peruso?
I just have a quick question for the department. So just so I clearly understand, the reassessment of the value of the property that would happen, prior to this the re-up, would that reevaluation then hold for the remainder of the lease for the next 15 years?
Let me call the subject matter expert up, Administrator Brian Cow. Rest of the lease?
Chair, Vice Chair Brian Cowell, Department of Agriculture, Ag Resource Management Division, Water and Land. Representative Pruso, could you please restate the question?
Sure. So I'm just curious about the nature of the reassessment. So if they're re-upping their lease and then it's going to be good for another 15 years, then does the valuation, is there any point in that next following 15 years where the property will be reassessed and the terms of the lease will be revisited, or will that those lease terms hold for the entirety of?
The terms of the lease will be set when the lease is issued. We've never had anything like this before, so we don't have anything to go off of. The way the current leases are set is that there are regular reopenings for leases. So for instance, if a lease is 35 years, the first reopening happens somewhere between year 10 and 15. So in this case, if it's 30, it's much shorter, and there's no extension provision on this particular one. So it could, for instance, be every 10 years. So you would set the lease for the first 10 years and then reopen again on the next 10 years. And that'll be taken through the end of the 30th. I can't say for certain what it will be because, again, we've never had to do this before.
So is that something that you folks will establish in rules?
I don't think it's necessary. We could just use our past of what we've been doing for leases that we do normally get out. Our typical initial lease for a brand new parcel is around 35 years, like I said. And the reopening period, the very first reopening period on those leases tend to be between 10 and 15 years. So I would expect it to be around that area.
Thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions? Vice Chair Kahaloa?
Mahalo, Chair. Director Hurd, just a
Yes.
quick question for you. The comment from the Farm Bureau about comparing lease renewals for agriculture to lease renewals for other state properties, whether it's manufacturing or other, do we know if there's synergy in the lease requirements, or are ag leases for state properties shorter term? Because we know that infrastructure is a big deal, and for farmers, just like any other business in the state of Hawaii, has to invest a lot to put in the infrastructure needed to do good business. So I think the intent of the bill is really to be able for farmers to invest in the infrastructure and then be able to have lease renewals for the purpose of being able to continue that business and utilize the investment that was put into the agricultural lands that they are leasing.
Representative Kahaloa, a very good point. I think what the Farm Bureau was intending with that comment was parity. If you're going to let DLNR extend their leases the way that they do, I mean, we're talking a whole hotel, we're talking a major investment, then that same consideration should be given to the farmers that have graded their land, that have put, accommodated the water management, land management. Same thing, the infrastructure, the labor, the risk. Just give us parity. I think that was the general message, that not necessarily for, quid pro quo, but just, hey, let us have the same benefit.
Do we know, though, if there is parity in ag versus a physical state facility?
Brian Kao, Department of Ag, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm unclear of the question. Let me try and answer what I think I'm hearing. I cannot speak for the entire governing body of the state. Oops, sorry. My apologies. I don't know what the conditions are for, say, airports or something like that. Their concessions and whatnot. I'm not sure what those are. The Department of Land and Natural Resources typically has a maximum 55-year lease, and they can cover most of the state lands that are not executive ordered to other agencies like ourselves, Department of Land and Department of Transportation and whatnot. I'm not familiar with how they've executed any allowances like this, but I do know that typically their maximum is 55 years. So whatever they'll initially set for 20 years, 30 years, whatever, that particular tenant can extend out to 55 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Cochran?
Thank you. And not sure what I'm wondering if there's like a map, and maybe I just need to go look up your sites for it, but where the parcels that are affected that we're speaking about here. Is there like a breakdown? In particular, I'm interested in Maui County, of course.
Of course, Representative Cochran, and it does impact your county, this particular, do you mind if we get back to you on that?
Sure,
Give some time?
please do. Oh,
Brian?
or do you have a follow-up? Thank you.
Subject matter expert.
Thank you, yes.
Sorry, Brian Kao, Department of Ag. We don't have any egg parks on the island of Maui itself, and this bill restricts it to egg parks. We do have an egg park in Molokai, which definitely qualifies for the population perspective of this. But other than that, we don't have anything in Maui County.
Okay, all right, well, thank you for that clarification.
And we can certainly provide you the location and the map.
Very good,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Okay. Rep. Russo?
Sorry, I have one follow-up question for the director. So, last year when we were talking with ADC about these licenses, they call them licenses, and the terms of the license, and we were expressing concerns about the impact of particular farming practices on the soil health. And we were talking about how little control we have over those practices. But one moment of control is the contract reopening. So I'm wondering if this is an opportunity for the state to come in and at least establish a baseline. So we gather data about the soil quality, we do some testing, and then require that the lessees or the licensees, depending on the department, return the land in the same quality or better. Is that something that you folks have discussed, or?
I have not heard that, but again, makes sense to, if we give you a parcel that's
Right.
great,
And on so
return it
many,
great.
on so much state land, we're already locked into these contracts, right? So we don't have any agency, but in this particular instance, we might.
Okay. Question is about returning the soil back to the status.
The leases all require that when the lease is returned, that the land is brought back into the releasable condition and the condition that it was set out in. We will, of course, put on any requirements set by law that need to be installed onto the leasing property. But at this time, we're not considering implementing any additional.
Because you folks don't do any testing.
No, we don't. We don't have that
It's a very
capacity.
vague, same quality, please. you know?
Yeah,
But
right.
you don't know what we were talking about, right? So we don't know how many pesticides have been used on that land and so forth.
Yeah,
So-
we don't do anything. We don't have the capacity for it either. So it would have to be a program that is set up in order to do so.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Chair.
members, seeing no further questions, we're gonna move on to HB 313 relating to agriculture. First testifier we have is the University of Hawaii. Okay. Next we have Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We'll stand on a written testimony in support. This is something we've pushed for several years. Again, with the lack of labor, we do need more technology for our farmers to be more efficient. I do want to point out that DBIT has in their proposed budget to the legislature asking for, and this is not in my testimony, that's why I'm pointing out, $7.5 million for a tropical ag tech facility located in Hilo, on foreign trade zone, and there is synergy. Because of the problems that are highlighted in the bill and in our testimony about possible EPA standards not being met by these foreign pieces of equipment, we can test it on that foreign trade zone because it's not U.S. land. So we met with them. I think they presented to the legislature, the Ways and Means and Finance committees, but we think there's some synergy there where this program, pilot program, can work with that particular project. I think they've done their due diligence, planning and design, so they're just looking for the CIP funding. So it's something that, again, it's to develop Tropical Ag Tech Hub and demonstrations. Their objective is to develop tropical ag and food technology and research development, again, with the focus on small farmers. That's what the equipment is, scale size that are appropriate for Hawaii farmers, not necessarily the mainland big commodity farms. So thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Hawaii Cattlemen's Council. In support, Ulupono Initiative. In support, University of Hawaii. In support. We also have 3 individuals that testified in support. Is there anyone here wishing to testify? Oh, I think we have a late testimony from the Department of Agriculture. Director.
Thank you, Chairperson, Vice Chair, and members. The Department of Agriculture has comment on this bill. The United States USDA has a program called EQIP. EQIP is giving the farmers in the mainland U.S., they're subsidizing their retrofitting of their farm equipment to bring them up to emission standards, bring them up to a better level of emissions, you might say, to qualify. But in the U.S., you only qualify if your air quality is of a certain low standard. But in Hawaii, we don't meet that standard. So our farmers do not get benefit of this subsidy because we have good air, you might say. But still, our farmers need this. They need to be retrofitted to meet EPA standards, so that's the comment. Department supports with that comment.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on HB 313? Seeing none. Members, any questions? Report?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question to Brian. The Farm Bureau, you guys are familiar with a lot of equipment, a lot of fertilizers, a lot of seeds, et cetera. But I noticed in the bill it says the equipment related to machinery from Japan. From my days at the East West Center, I learned very thoroughly that the smallest and the least expensive in a massive scale for farmers is India. Are you familiar with the Indian technology and the equipment and the pricing, like Mahindra tractors, et cetera?
Thank you, Representative Ward, for the question. Not necessarily. We just did a site visit to New Zealand, and even there we saw that there's quite a bit of dealers out there that we are not familiar with. I think Japan was because there was a legislative or an agricultural visit years ago up to Hokkaido that identified some equipment, and I think even some of our Kauai farmers may have found a way to bring some in, maybe retrofitting them themselves, which, unfortunately may invalidate any warranties or anything, but they found a way. So we'd absolutely want to include any other regions. We thought we'd start with as a pilot with Japan, but the whole concept behind this program is for our extension service, who works directly with farmers, to find the needs, to do a needs assessment. To bring it in. But again, with that facility, the proposed facility in Hilo, we could bring in from, we believe, anywhere. Because what we want to do is find the best equipment for our farmers here in Hawaii.
As you know from the Finance Committee hearing, the demographics and the income of farmers, that they were old and they were poor. My point is, if you want to save 40, 50% on the equipment, I think the Chair, if you would consider India as part of this, either in the committee report or as an amendment, that Indian equipment is by far not the same as Japanese, but look, they got 1.5 billion people that they're servicing, and probably 80% of them are rural and they're farmers. Thank you.
Representative, if I can make a point, we'd absolutely consider equipment from anywhere.
Thank you.
That would be helpful
Except
for the
Russia.
farmers. Well, yeah, except not anywhere. Appropriate places.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, members? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on to our next bill, HB 611, relating to agriculture. First testifier we have is the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Okay, in support, we have the Department of Agriculture.
Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, members of the committee, the department offers comment. The bill wants to insert customary and traditional subsistence farming into the Hawaii Right to Farm Act. Oh, I'm sorry, into the, yes, the Hawaii Right to Farm Act. The Hawaii Right to Farm Act was more to protect the farmers and the consumers against noise and pollution and issues like that, not necessarily for traditional farming, although there is a place for that. It probably would not be in this particular act. And the concern is that if we do start to add Native Hawaiian customary and traditional farm, if we so move on this bill, then we're kind of opening up the idea that Korean natural farming has a place and other traditional types of farming might have. We just had a lot of press about the Filipino farming styles, Susan Mercado from the Hawaii Public Health Institute. So it's a good thought, but maybe misplaced in this particular bill. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Okay, next testifier we have is Hawaii Farmers Union United. I believe they're testifying via Zoom.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Hunter Hevelin with Hawaii Farmers Union United. Wanted to stand on our written testimony in support overall of this bill, but I think important to highlight that the extension of right to farm protections from nuisance complaints over coverage of customary and traditional practices, I think, is an important protection to recognize the unique agricultural lineage here and to conserve biocultural restoration efforts going forward. Mahalo for the opportunity.
Mahalo for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, member of the committee, Brian Miyamoto, on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Chair, I believe we submitted selected comments, but we do support the intent of the measure. We do echo some of the department's comments and concerns regarding Chapter 165, which is a right to farm, which basically protects commercial farmers from nuisance lawsuits. And we believe that if that there's probably a better spot in the State Planning Act for this particular issue. We absolutely support farming done by Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners for customary and traditional subsistence farming. We support all farming practices, all farmers, so we do believe they should be afforded protection. However, the Right to Farm Act was designed for the commercial farmers, and if this bill, well, that would also invalidate Chapter 205 -2 and 205-4, which is also included in the measure because those two chapters or those two amendments within this bill reference 165-2, the Right to Farm Act. So we support this. We don't believe 165 and 205 are the places for it. Quite possibly Section 226-25 might be a more appropriate spot, but we absolutely support the concept of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your testifier. Next testimony we have is from Chelsea Marvin. Okay. In support. And we have two other individuals in support. Anyone here wishing to testify on HB 611? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions? Rep. Ward?
Chair, Department of Agriculture, please. Do we have a number of people who are doing traditional and customary farming?
Oof. Farm Bureau? You have a
Right?
number?
Or does anyone?
I think it's kind of like an,
It comes and goes. It's
yeah,
sporadic,
yeah.
but is there any head count? It's been on the statutes for quite some time, actually. I mean, is it 1%, 10%, 20, 30,
Brian,
40?
do you have any idea how many farmers are customary and natural? Maybe-
The census shows 7,300 farms. Majority of those are small farms, so
Okay.
I don't think we have an exact.
Those are normal, I mean, not normal, I mean, those are the regular farmers, right? Okay, let me approach it differently. How many nuisance lawsuits that we're so concerned about have there been that this is going to raise more of? What's the number?
Good question. I'd have to go back and get that number for you. I
I
understand.
It's like we're going against something
Right.
that we're thinking is big.
And I
but
think,
not.
I can go back to DHHL, maybe talk to Director Anderson, try to see if he has a number for the number of traditional farms that are on his land. Might be a good number, but I will check with him.
But the lawsuits, it would be, or the nuisance suits would be the.
Probably
AG.
our office,
Or your office. Okay, Chair,
Okay.
if we could get that information.
We'll follow up on that, Rep.
Thank
Ward.
you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions,
Thank
comments?
you, Rep. Ward.
Concerns, members? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next bill, HB 284, relating to taro. First testifier will be the Department of Taxation.
Good morning, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kaloa. My name is David Richmond. I'm here on behalf of the Department of Taxation. The department stands on its written testimony and just providing comments, and I'm available for questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for being here. Appreciate the testimony. Next testifier we have is Tax Foundation of Hawaii.
Hi, good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Jade McMillan on behalf of Tavia Machika and the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We will stand on our written comments submitted for this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier we have is the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, members of the committee. The Department of Agriculture supports this bill, and the comment that we have is that we want to acknowledge this exemption shall not apply to supermarkets, big box stores, or bulk buyers or shippers of raw value-added tariff products, but defers to the Department of Taxation with respect to the proposed amendments to the chapter.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. I'd like to alter our testimony and say we stand in strong support of this critically important cultural crop. We would like to add that we'd like to see this type of support for all our small farmers, for all our crops. But this is particular, specific to taro, so we stand in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farmers Union United.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Hunter Heblin, Hawaii Farmers Union. We stand on our written testimony in support of this bill, but do want to highlight the recognition of the potential quagmire of enforcement, that I think this bill is quite similar to one introduced last year that ended up being vetoed by the governor. In response to that, we worked to draft a related program that would pursue similar aims to support kalo producers, and that's now codified in Bill HB 311 that would provide general excise tax exemptions for inputs, which may be easier to track and cause less issues in terms of the value chain across, say, kalo sales. And so, well, we stand in support of the intent. We also hope that there will be a hearing promptly for HB 311. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action. In support, we have Hawaii Seed. In support, we also have 10 individuals in support. Anyone else wishing to testify on HB 284? Please state your name for the record.
Aloha Makako, my name is Hema Kealohanui Kayama Watson. Honorable Chair Cedric Gates, Honorable Vice Chair Kirsten Kahaloa, and all the members of the Agricultural Committee. Again, my name is Hema Kealohanui Kayama Watson. I am a senior at Halakumana PCS, and I am testifying in strong support of House Bill 284 and in support of our local farmers. Kalo was a staple crop of Hawaii since the first Kanaka Maoli landed here centuries ago. This crop has been neglected and put out of fashion recently, making it incredibly hard for kalo farmers to actually make a living in Hawaii. We need to reestablish our food security, and one of the best, healthiest, and environmentally friendly ways to do this is through kalo farming. By removing the tax burden on income from kalo farmers, you will allow these farmers to actually be able to grow and provide for our communities without a large struggle. This bill could also allow for others to create their own farms without carrying so much worry on their shoulders. Kalo currently is not a very profitable crop at all. However, it is one of the most nutritious foods out there and can be used to feed large amounts of people easily through its milling process in Napoi. Its mass production and marketing would help improve Hawaii's health issues and return, as well as strengthen a local element inside of our food market. Kalo farmers would not have to compete with other international interests nor other farmers in Hawaii. In the end, we could see a more health-conscious, environmentally friendly, and food-independent Hawaii. And again, I'm testifying in strong support of House Bill 284 and urge all other Agricultural Committee members to do the exact same. Mahalo.
Mahalo for making time to be here. Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions, comments, or concerns? Rep Ward, go
With
ahead.
your permission, sir.
Go ahead.
Is it Watson?
Yeah.
Question. When you said kalo production is not profitable, could you give me some numbers? I've heard that some of them are barely making it survival-wise. And the big guys are on Kauai, and they're just barely making it.
Yeah, what I can say, so again, I'm just a senior halakumana, so I don't have all the numbers behind my back. What I do remember though is when I went to an actual kalo farmer, I believe it was in Kahana. I went to the back of their farm and he was teaching us about it. He talked about how much he was actually making per pound. I think it was like 99 cents or something. It was very low comparative to what they were actually making. And he said they had to make a large amount of kalo to actually get it through. And that's a large reason as to why there's not many kalo farmers in Hawaii still.
That may be typical. If I can continue with Brian of
Go ahead,
the
Rep.
Farm
Ward.
Bureau. Brian, can you confirm or deny what you just said? Do you have any idea how much the kalo farmers are making or not making?
Thank you, Representative. We like to use the phrase razor-thin margins, if that. Kalo farmers have to deal with the apple snail, with the moorhen, the coot that eat their products, even the nene. So like every other farmer, it's a struggle. It's difficult dealing with possibly labor costs, transportation costs. As you heard Hawaii Farmers Union talk about the inputs, the increase with supply chain, just inflation. So we don't have exact number. Probably could find out maybe from some others. But like all farmers, it's a struggle. Farming is a difficult business. Razor-thin margins at best. I saw a report, I think it was from the mid-2000s, that estimated that farmers lose about $20 per acre. So there is loss, but that's not to say all farmers. And some of our kalo farmers, as you heard, are on Hawaii Island. They're on Kauai. So to get it to market, they have that additional cost of transportation both ways, inputs from Honolulu over to them on the neighbor islands, and then sending it back here to the market. So it's a tough business.
Thank you for changing your mind on the bill.
I just went from support to strong support.
Oh, I thought you went from one side. Okay, thank you. Chair, I have to ask the bottom line question to the DOTAX, if I may.
Okay, go ahead,
How
Rep. Ward.
much of a hit is it going to be? And I hope you've got some numbers. How big of a GET tax exemption are we going to create with this?
I do apologize, Rep. Ward, but we do not have that number. But I definitely, the department can get
Could
back
be
to
to
you.
your advantage or disadvantage, actually.
We're all about implementing tax
But
policies.
all these bills that have a metric like that, when you guys get it ahead of time, I know this was Sylvia Luke when she was chair. She said, hey, guys, look, you're the only ones who really got credibility to do this. So if I may encourage you to try as much as possible before hearings, because as long as I'm in the meeting, we're always going to ask that question. What's the hit to the general fund?
We'll definitely take
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, seeing no other questions from Rep. Ward, we're gonna head on and move to our next bill, HB 488, relating to aquaculture. First testifier we have is the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Chair Gates, Vice Chair, members of the committee. The Department of Agriculture supports this bill. The comment of support is that it allows the department to actively oversee the aquaculture operations through the leasing process. So we would check occasionally to be sure that they're applying proper techniques, and we support the bill.
Thank you for your testimony, Director. We're gonna go ahead and move on to our next testifier, Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Good morning, Chair Gates, committee members. Michael Kane on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We've submitted comments asking for clarification, and we're primarily interested in how this bill would impact mariculture operations in state marine waters. And with that clarification, we hopefully would be able to elaborate on our comments in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next testifier we have is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on the Hawaii Farm Bureau. We'll stand on a written testimony in support. We want to support our aquaculture industry. It's one of the sectors in agriculture that has opportunity for real growth. I believe it's about a $70 million industry right now. And the legislature has shown their support recently and acknowledging the importance of our aquaculture industry by revitalizing the aquaculture development program in 2019. And last year, the legislature funded 4 positions for the ADP program. So this is just the next step. We need to identify sites where we can actually have a farmers farming aquaculture. And again, contributing not only to food security and food sustainability, but also to help revitalize or diversify our economy. So we do support aquaculture and aquaculture program and any efforts to increase the aquaculture industry. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. And Chair Gates, may I share that from the last hearing for Representative Ward Chair, there is some data. Dr. Matthew Loke had just handed me some, so we can share that with the committee on Kalo.
Okay, please
Kalo
email
production.
that to us. Thank you. Okay, we have food policy internship in support. Noting that was the last person identifying they would be here to testify. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on HB 488? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions? Rep. Russo?
I have a question for Todd Lowe. So, this bill really addresses leases for commercial purposes, and you know that I'm really interested in restorative aquaculture, and I'm wondering if this would also apply to those kinds of leases, and if you folks are still engaged in that work, and if you can tell us a little bit about it.
Right, so good morning. I'm Todd Lowe at the Aquaculture Development Program for Department of Ag. Thanks for the question. So restorative aquaculture is, for everyone's, just to set a baseline, is using seaweed and bivalves for their ecosystem services, right? So that's different than commercial operations initially. There's also the ability to help clean the water, to help restore ecosystems, carbon sequestration and things like that. Typically, Department of Ag does focus on commercial operations. So this bill is really kind of focused on that because that's what's in the statutes and in the admin rules. But as an organization, we are pushing forward to look more at restorative aquaculture. We have a contract out there this year to do a risk assessment for restorative aquaculture. And that will help us take a sort of define the playing field and hopefully move more toward a permitting type of framework, because right now there isn't one. Our restorative aquaculture or restorative practices are typically at the grassroots level, and we'd like to ramp them up to be more robust and have more impact.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Vice Chair Kahaloa.
Mahalo, Chair. Follow-up question with you is that the Food Policy Plus team, their testimony talked about a prospective amendment, and they asked about noting that lessee activities in the aquaculture area must not conflict with or adversely impact a native Hawaiian fish pond or conflict with or negatively impact a community-based subsistence fishing area. Maybe that extends to Rep. Perusso's comments as well, but just how does that fit in with that requested amendment to the intent of what your department is working on?
Thank you. That sort of fits in kind of the same topic of generally Department of Ag stuff is commercially based, right? But we do know that there's activities in the fish ponds and things like limuhuis and different things that are out there that are community based. I don't believe this bill was to encroach on those activities or push them away. We do have to look at more ways how to include them. But again, this is sort of a little bit of a gray area for the Department of Ag since, and we're sort of working our way through it. Whether that's a tough question about the amendment itself. We'd have to take a look at that further, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay. Members, any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna thank you for your testimony. We're gonna move on to HB 615 relating to restrictions on agricultural uses and activities. First testifier we have for HB 615 is Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Thank you again, Chairperson Gates, Vice Chair, members of the committee. The Department of Agriculture has a comment that the proposed amendment appears to prevent private agreements created prior to July 8th, 2003 that have since expired and not been renewed from being enforced. So the comment is that it's a good bill. It restricts the agricultural uses of or activities, but we feel that it no longer applies.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. We're going to go ahead and move on to Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Okay, in support, Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. This bill is basically fixing a loophole for a bill that was passed in 2021, Act 94, which essentially restricted, or was a conflict between farmers and gentlemen farmers on agricultural land. Again, it's bringing up the right to farm issue, right? The nuisance complaints. So a law was passed, the legislature passed it in 2001 that would not allow enforcement of re-recorded homeowner association restrictions if the restriction prohibited bona fide agricultural activity on agricultural land. This goes one step further by including agreements. So we believe there's a loophole. There weren't always homeowner association agreements. There's other agreements that maybe some of the gentleman farmers are utilizing in order to, again, bring nuisance complaints against legitimate farmers, bona fide farmers. And we are seeing some cases on Kauai, and that's why we're trying to fix or the legislature is trying to fix that loophole. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Mahalo for your testimony. We have one person in support. Anyone else here wishing to testify on HB 615? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none. With that being said, we're gonna move on to our last measure, HB 248, relating to education. First testifier we have is Hawaii DOE.
Good morning, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, members of the committee. Kurt Otaguro, Deputy Superintendent, testifying on behalf of Superintendent Keith Hayashi. Department stands on its written testimony and offers some comments on the measure. I think some of these comments, I want to preface by saying that the department is committed to sourcing local, using the local sources for food and production. I think some of the things that the department has done to date, we may not communicate it enough. For example, the department purchases 100% of ground beef now from 3 local providers. These are done through the Assistant Superintendent Randy Tanaka and his team. They also do, they've done a produce pilot, lettuce, and on different things to 83 schools right now. He's working on Maui with Mahi Pono to see if that capacity of oranges that are needed, I forget what the tonnage was, what's a lot, if Maui Pono and Maui can produce that. There are other fish farms, there's taro, ulu, the whole 9 yards. So the point being that the department is serious, is taking action, and is producing some things right now in pilot. We're not there to expand it, but we are very focused on it. Some of the things on the technology side, AS Tanaka has already implemented digital menu software that they're going to be looking at. And what that does is it provides the ability to capture data from students for feedback. And at the end of the day, what we're all after is serving our students meals that they want to eat, that are good, nutritious. But the only way to get feedback is through technology and getting that. So those are some of the examples. And as a result of that, I believe the department is absolutely wanting to regionalize some of these menu selections because of that very purpose of you can't get certain things in certain areas, and we absolutely agree to that. And then in the workforce area, working with our own department in curriculum as well as the university system to make sure that we continue to invest in the evolution of the cafeteria worker, whether it's the manager, whether it's the chef or cook, or the servers. And these are times where, as we all know, workforce is difficult to find. And so if we can automate or get outside the box and look at, I know Mr. Tanaka went to look at robotics in a different country for just the simplest things like serving or collection of dishes, plates. And so I think the department's very proactive in that. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Thanks for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to move on to Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Brian Miyamoto, here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Sorry, I lied and said I was going to stand on most of the bills, but I think these are important bills, important issues for agriculture, so thank you for allowing all of us to testify. The Hawaii Farm Bureau stands in support of this measure. We've supported farm to school for decades. We understand challenges from the agriculture side, but we are encouraged, and I'm encouraged personally, being involved in this for nearly 18 years, that I see DOE's increased support, and I actually see progress. We want to see more progress, but very encouraged, and we are very supportive of DOE's efforts, and we want to make sure that the farming community did tell DOE that we want to work with DOE, we want to work with the legislature, we want to work with all parties to see increased produce in our public schools. And as a reminder, I did remind Chair Woodson and the Education Committee that the legislature did set a goal in 2021 that DOE would utilize 30% local produced foods and goods by 2030. That's 7 years from now. So we do want to see continued progress. We do want to work with the department. We understand that it is difficult for our farmers, so we're encouraged with their consideration of food hubs to help aggregate from the small farmers to get through some of the regulatory hurdles so that we can source more within the public schools, but also farm to school has to also addresses education and nutrition, and those components of farm to school we also support. So thank you, and Farm Bureau stands ready to support the legislature, support the Department of Education, Department of Agriculture on making sure that our farm to school program is successful. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Mahalo for your testimony. We're going to go on to our next testifier. We have Hawaii Farmers Union United.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Hawaii Farmers Union stands on its testimony in support of this bill as a critical measure to expand access for our keiki to fresh and healthy local food. So hope to see this and similar measures make further progress to codify and hasten the implementation of some of the goals we've already put into place. Mahalo.
Mahalo for your testimony. We're going to move on to Hawaii Public Health Institute.
Good morning, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Kahaloa, the rest of the members. My name is Dennis Chase, and I am the Program Manager of the Hawaii Farm to School Hui at Hawaii Public Health Institute. And we want to testify in support of this bill. We have some reasons for that within our testimony. I would also like to add that we believe that the Farm to School project statewide would be better served if there were more local control, which is what this bill would do through the different complex areas. A.S. Tanaka testified yesterday at the Education Committee that the Department of Education is providing 100,000 meals a day. That's a lot. And for the people working in that office, that's really a lot. So we think it is very difficult for them to work with individual schools, with smaller projects, with smaller farms, with improvements within the system that you just don't have the resources for when you're handling 100,000 meals a day. We think, for example, if schools in food insecure areas wanted to add after-school snacks or supper for 100 students or a couple hundred students, that's very difficult to procure and to deal with if you have 100,000 meals a day. But we think if it's a complex area issue where they have staff that this bill creates, and we're talking about 5,000 meals a day, a couple hundred extra meals or a pilot program to see how that would work becomes much more possible, and we think much more beneficial to the children of Hawaii. And I'm happy to answer questions. I have numbers too, Representative Ward. Thank you.
Okay, we have North Shore EVP in support, Hawaii Cattlemen's Council in support, Hawaii Primary Care Association in support, Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action in support, Pacific American Foundation in support, Hawaii Appleseed in support, Hawaii Seed in support, and we have 5 individuals all in support. Anyone else wishing to testify on HB 248? Okay, seeing none. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Rep. Ward?
The DOE, please. And if his numbers aren't correct, I'll come to you. 30% is the goal, but what percentage are we at right now?
6.2.
6.2. As the farm union gentleman said, can we hasten the process? 6.2 doesn't sound too robust, actually.
It doesn't, and that's why the department has taken very diligent process to ensure that from an execution standpoint, once we say we're going to do it, that all the cards line up. For example, capacity, right? While we want to decentralize, while we want to buy local, we just had a situation last week that I told the education committee that unfortunately a farm had to recall their lettuce, but we didn't have a backup. They don't have a backup to provide that extra. So as a result, this week the kids are not eating lettuce. So, but these are things that are correctable. It's just that we need to make sure that it's all, we address those kind of things.
So that's supply, demand, or
Supply, demand, and
bureaucracy?
you buy from the big guys because they have capacity to provide for the 100,000 that the gentleman was saying. But there are unintended consequences when you decentralize. And those are the things that the department has to also weigh in. We have examples that in the schools, as you know, the principals call most of the decisions, call the shots, so to speak. One area that they do it is in technology, so that's good, right? They create their own websites, they have the autonomy to do that, they have funding to do that, but every website looks different. But from a support standpoint, when you talk technical, it's all different. And if the central office or state office is not aware of that, or doesn't have control over that, it can create nightmares from a support standpoint.
How many farmers are you dealing with right now?
Right now, well, we had.
I mean, you said you're 100% already with
Yes, so there's
ground beef.
three producers. Go ahead.
We deal with, I don't have a firm number for you, but we deal with a lot of farmers. The challenge we have is, if you look at the plate that we give to the students, there's five compartments, so to speak. So the main compartment primarily is a beef or a pizza or a mac and cheese. So we have to look at replacing those compartments with local produced product. So the leafy greens is a requirement from a federal standard. That we don't have so much of a problem. Beef, we don't have so much of a problem. Fruit is the next one we're trying to achieve. And Deputy mentioned we're talking with Mahi Pono. So on Maui, we provide 1.5 million pounds of oranges to the kids, and that is all brought in. So we're working with Mahi Pono because they have expanded their citrus operation where we can buy from them to provide those products, and that's a local consumption. So the challenge we have is capacity when we go to these.
The farmer's capacity?
Yeah, the farmer's capacity, okay. Right? And so that's why the hubs make sense, right? Because we're going to buy regionally. Obviously, the benefit is not only an economic one, but it's also a carbon footprint one. We're not bringing this stuff all over from the mainland U.S. There's nothing wrong with their product, but it makes more sense for us to consume here. That helps the farmer. The other thing you got to consider is we may purchase at a little higher price But it's just like that old adage of the tourism dollar. What does that dollar do? It's respent a few other times. So the macro benefit for the state's economy is a good one. We stabilize our food security issue. We're a large buyer of food, right? But we have an obligation to provide these meals, nutritious meals, to the students.
How big is the multiplier you're suggesting?
I don't have that number, but I would suggest to you that dollar is spent a few times. The farmer buys fertilizer, all of that.
When you mention fruit, are we not nearly independent in terms of watermelon production?
The most recent work we're doing with is Alun Farms on Kauai. They have gone to the Kekaha Plain, and they are producing, I believe, watermelon and another type of melon. We've had a discussion about banana, and that's increasing the capacity on island. But we also need that capacity to be transferred to Honolulu and our other major markets, meaning Honolulu, Maui, or wherever we can use that local fruit. The backhaul, what we need to do is work with Young Brothers, because the backhaul to bring it into Honolulu could be a little problematic, but we're working through that.
So in 7 years, you're going to make 30%.
I think we're going to get there sooner.
You can exceed it, maybe?
That's the game plan, right? Because 30%, 40%, 50%.
We're saying we're going to be fossil fuel independent by 2040. You know how big of a jump that is? And yours is Manini in comparison.
I just bought an electric car, so I'm trying to make my contributions.
How big a car is it?
But we'll get there. I think also you need to realize that the management of the cafeterias is the responsibility of the principal. So that is now localized. We don't manage the personnel at the school level. The principal manages that for a number of different reasons. Because during COVID, when we had a cafeteria shut down because a staff member caught COVID, those principals are constantly networking with their peer groups. Okay, can you now provide 100 meals? Because some of the cafeterias or the kitchens serve multiplicity of schools. So that network, we really got down to a pretty good science. During COVID, we did over 1 million handout meals, so we've tested the system. We're good to go if we go through this drill again.
Thank you, sir. Keep up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Peruso.
Yeah, yes, Tanaka. So just a follow-up, just a couple clarification questions. Wouldn't that multiplier effect be much more dramatic if we were, rather than paying Mahi Pono, which is owned by a California group, paying small local farmers on each island to provide those foods for our local schools?
There is some truth to that, but the challenge we have is consistent product, not only quantity, but quality.
Right, which kind of goes to the point of this bill, which is, as you know, a decentralization bill. So this is a pretty significant change that this legislation is calling for, and I recognize that change is not comfortable. And I also recognize that your office does not have total control over cafeteria staff. That is the principal's responsibility, and this bill is an effort to get at that responsibility, because the complex area superintendents are the supervisors for those principals. They are the direct supervisors for those principals, so they have more impact on their actions. But to go to the role that you play, your office plays, recently we've had about $500,000 come down in federal funding that would have supported training for local scratch cooking in our cafeterias, and you declined to let cafeteria staff take time to attend those trainings. And I'm wondering why that is. If we have federal funds that have, we've applied for those funds, staff has taken time to apply for that federal funding for the purpose of supporting farm to school, and it just seems to be, maybe obstructionist is too harsh a term, but it doesn't seem to be helpful if we want to have those cafeteria workers trained. And I'm wondering what your rationale was for refusing to allow those cafeteria workers to attend.
Well, on the front, it seems like $500,000 would be a great value for us. The fact of the matter is I got to take staff offline, and that cost, where we have tried scratch cooking, and scratch cooking didn't evolve to the place where it was hoped to do because of the makeup of the cafeteria staff. It's not a real sustainable model. So that's why we've moved to this centralized kitchen. I've looked at 6 kitchens across the western U.S., and like Zippy's, we looked at the Zippy's model first. Their chili, their Portuguese bean soup is all centralized and
Right.
delivered that way.
I'm familiar with that model. So are you saying that it's your intention to no longer support scratch cooking in our school cafeterias and to move the support of the department to primarily to centralized food kitchens, which is following a Zippy's model? Just for clarification.
No. It's a model that we have to reevaluate because a couple things are happening in our kitchens. I would tell you in the next 5 years, we would have about a 20 or 30% attrition of that staff, right? The way our kitchen operations have been designed, it's not designed for scratch cooking, right? And that's the challenge we have. We have a declining workforce. And we've looked at these models across the country, across the nation. You have more centralized cooking. The other value to that is that I can centralize local product to one area, prep and distribute, as opposed to, I talked to Mililani High School, and they were buying from Maury Gardens, Fred Lau. And I talked to Fred and said, are we buying, what's the deal? He said, we're not buying from them now. I said, why? Because we could not sustain that scratch cooking program. It's much more complicated than just, the staff has to learn how to chop, to cook, to prep, all of that. And that's labor intensive. But the model is not one size fits all. So that's the evaluation we're going through. Last year, you tried to introduce a bill on the software, right?
Correct,
And
Triton.
yeah, and we fully supported that. If we cannot measure, we cannot manage. And that's part of the challenge now. Until we be able to manage and know what we're buying, another member of your team asked me, Randy, how do you know they're not buying from their cousin? I don't know. Because the purchasing of that is left at the local level.
Right. So just one last comment, Chair, if I might. That is precisely the purpose of this legislation, which is to help support your work by decentralizing that kind of control. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, and I appreciate your efforts.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Chair.
for your support.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, Vice Chair.
Yes, Tanaka, one more question. Mahalo, Chair.
I'm feeling like Brian Miyamoto wearing out the carpet. Brian's my hero. I mean, he's got this thing down pretty good.
This may be a question as a new legislator that might be in an annual report that I haven't been able to read yet as a new legislator, but, a question about centralized kitchens. How many people are working on the local procurement to the centralized model of kitchen, or where are you in that process? Because procurement takes active time and commitment. I don't believe a principal has enough time to do that work on their own. So do we have those procurers who are working locally with food hubs and farms? What does that staffing model look like to get to your central? I like the centralized model, but who's doing the local procurement and working individually, regionally? And I know this bill might ask for CAS for some support. What model is currently in place for procuring and working with our local farmers to go through the comments you just stated?
So our current model on procurement for large bulk items is purchased through the state office. We have procurement people that purchase that, and every year it goes out to bid. There's some different requirements, but the local level. So we have a contract with Waihata for some of the products. So that's all on a purchase list. They order, right? Some of the leafy greens, the local guys local schools are buying, but we'd like to manage that differently from a quality standpoint and a quantity standpoint. So some of the services that the state office provides, compliance issues, give you an example, the milk that we purchase comes from out of state, right? We have had some challenges with the quality of the milk, so we deal with that with the milk producer. We can't pound on them because we need them. They're partners. We need to have milk. So we've had multiple discussions on the pint. The problem with the pint is it doesn't retain the chill level that we need to have. So we're looking at, do we bulk purchase in 6-pound bags versus, so we're constantly looking at these options. Back to your procurement question, the big items we manage the procurement of.
So who handles the regional purchasing items? That's part of the question. Or are we only doing the $100,000 current procurement contracts at this time? Because you said regional centralized kitchen, which means to me, regional purchasing and buying, and who is doing that? Or is this part of the bill that we need to address to make that happen? Who's working with food hubs? Who's working with small farms? Because you said it's hard to supply. Some of that, if we do regionally, we can meet those small demands on every island individually. And I think Maui students deserve to eat Maui-grown food, and Hawaii Island students deserve to eat food grown on their island and not shipped from a neighbor island.
Right. So right now, we don't have any centralized kitchen. We have proposed the money has been passed. The governor hasn't released it, or the previous governor didn't release it. And now it goes back through the process again. So we're not in a complete system yet. We have advocated for the central kitchen. We've done our homework on how they do it, right? We think that model will work for us. On the neighbor islands, you're going to see the first central kitchen is proposed to be at Whitmore, right? And so the next one will look at different smaller kitchens. We have 3 models, 35,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet, depending on the number of schools. So that model, we're building that business now, right? So when we get to that place, those regional kitchens would be able to purchase the product from a local level through the hubs.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Vice Chair Kahaloa. The question to procurement and decentralization, it's a state challenge. Procurement is complex, as you very well know, and what we've had are agencies, not just the DOE, but other agencies that are not familiar with procurement because they don't do it every day, run into some procurement problems, right? And that's why you have areas that do procurement, whether it's construction, small services. Now, I know that the State Procurement Office is in the process of automating things, e-procurement, to make it more simple so that a layman out there can just go in and click and it's already vetted. And so I know there's a movement over the state, but the concern that the department had was one of those things. There's 15 CASs, complex area superintendents, 258 principals. Some of them may be good in procurement, probably not their top priority. And so that is a concern we're going to take away from the educational aspect of it. You know, they're worrying about security, they're worrying about IT, they're worrying about parents, they're worrying about a lot of different things. So is this particular one important in the scheme of weighing what a complex area superintendent should be doing at that office? And that's all the comments that we have. I think the committee should evaluate all of that, and that's what the department has to do.
Mahalo.
Thank you. I do have a quick question for AS Tanaka. In regards to implementation, I think this is where we keep getting stuck with. We have these great goals, ideas, but the implementation part is the hardest, as we all know. In terms of our cafeteria workers, from my understanding, they're unionized. Right?
Correct, UPW.
UPW. And so how does the department work through that besides collective bargaining in regards to them doing cooking from scratch? Is this all new duties for them, new tasks for them? And is this something that going forward the governor will have to work at the collective bargaining table to fit all of these in if that's the route we're taking?
So we've had 2 meetings with UPW. We've actually walked the Zippy's kitchen to share the model with them and what we're thinking, so they have a better understanding. Their greatest concern is equity for their members and our employees. Are they going to lose jobs? And that doesn't, after the meetings we've had with them, that doesn't seem to be of the greatest concern, because some of the jobs will change, right? Our concern is whether we're going to have enough staff to do the work. So it's not a function of losing jobs, it's a function of making sure we have the staff to do the job. So we've already started that discussion with them. I expect that we continue as we continue to march towards how we're gonna serve our students, We're still going to have cafeteria operations. They still have to serve, they still have to heat. The process is called cook-chill, so they're going to have to do that. As you know, all our school kitchens are rather old, so the process of what we're doing with equipment and all of that. We have two pilots going on right now, Lanai and Molokai, to evaluate their kitchens and that operations. Hana will come next because they're the furthest out. They're the most challenged for us if something happens, right? And we went through that experience with COVID. So we're talking to the unions and moving that forward.
Thank you. So if the duties that you folks are trying to put on these union members aren't in a collective bargaining agreement, what's to stop a union to say that, you know, this is out of their contracts and we don't want to do this and implement the program? Is that something that we should be looking at ahead of the curve when we're trying to implement this farm to school program?
No, I think we're at the right point in time because we've started these discussions. We expect to continue and listen to what they have to say. It's, you know, like you said, it's not the why, it's the how, right? How do we get this done? And we've started that process to work with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, members.
Chair, could I do a
okay,
follow-up
Rep
on that?
Ward,
I
quick
wanted
question.
Randy, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said we're going to build a kitchen 35,000 square feet. Did I hear?
Correct.
That's
Correct.
as big as Hawaii Kai Costco.
Hawaii Kai what?
Costco. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is that standard for a regional kitchen?
The models.
That's almost an acre.
Yeah, the models I've seen, I've been to Tacoma, Washington, Oakland, Sacramento, Clark County, and San Diego. The average size is 35,000 square feet. Clark County has the biggest. It's almost 60,000 square feet. They serve 325 schools from the central kitchen. The one that's most consistent with our model is the LA Unified District, and that's 35,000 square feet. So that's the imprint we've taken.
I would call that a factory rather than a kitchen.
we do a lot of meals. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, comments, or concern, we're going to recess for decision making at 11:30 a.m. today in room 325. Aloha, we are reconvening the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems. Today is Wednesday, February 1st. The time is 11:38 and we are in room 325. We are reconvening on the 9:45 a.m. Committee hearing notice for decision making only. And we're gonna go ahead and start off with our first bill, HB 307. Chair's recommendation is going to be to move this out as a HD1, defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. Members, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Mahalo, Chair. Committee voting on HB 307. Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Rep. Cochran.
Aye.
Rep. Lowen.
Aye.
Rep. Peruso.
Aye.
Rep. Woodson. Rep. Ward. Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 313 relating to agriculture. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as a HD1. We're going to blank out the appropriation amount and defect the date to July 1st, 3000. Any questions, comments, concerns? Rep. Ward?
Chair, is this the 313, which is the Japanese foreign equipment?
Correct.
If you look at the Kubota and the other tractors, they're kind of like John Deere pricing. And again, I'm not making it up, but the Indian engineers have made it so where the really, really poor dirt farmers of India are able to afford equipment. And if in the committee report or something, you could at least mention India as a way of saving at least 40 to 50% for the farmers as a way of information. If we're going to do small equipment, I think we would be amiss if we didn't at least give them honorable mention of some sort. Anyways, that's my request.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns? Chair will include in the committee report for the next committee to consider including other countries a part of this program. And
Thank you,
with
Chair.
that being said, we'll go for the vote. Vice Chair?
Mahalo. Voting on HB 313. Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye, noting that the presence of all members here today. Representatives, are there any members voting no? Are there any members voting with reservations? Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 611 relating to agriculture. Chair's recommendation is to move this out as an HD1 to further the conversation around customary and traditional subsistence farming. We will defect the date to July 1st, 3000. Also in the committee report, we will ask the next committee to consider changing the Hawaii Planning Act section to 226-25B and consider amending if necessary. With that being said, any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 611, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Noting our full committee here today, representatives, are there any members voting no? Any members voting with reservations? Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 284 relating to taro. A lot of conversations around this piece of legislation. To further the conversation, we're gonna move this out as an HD1. We will be adding in definitions to amend the terms regarding supermarket and big box stores. Also, we will be amending page 2, line 20, relating to the 4 million tons of kalo to 4 million pounds, which I believe was the accurate representation. And with that being said, we will take any questions, comments, concerns. Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 284, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Noting our full committee's presence here today, any representatives voting no? Any representatives voting with reservations? Chair, your measure is adopted.
Okay, Moving on to HB 488 relating to agriculture. Chair's recommendation is to pass this out as an HD1 with technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. We are also going to add amendments to clarify the definition of aquaculture, and we're going to defect the date to July 1st, 3000. Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 488, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. We have our full committee present today. Any representatives voting no? Any representatives voting with reservations? Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to the second to the last bill, HB 615, relating to restrictions on agriculture uses and activities. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as is. Any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 615, Chair elects to pass as is. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. We have our full committee present. Mahalo, representatives. Are there any members voting no? Any representatives voting with reservations? Chair, your measure is adopted.
All right, thank you. On to the last bill, HB 248. I think this bill has great intentions, and the goal to implement the Farm to School program in our schools across the state should be a priority for all of us. And I know this bill does need further conversations with the departments to clarify some of the language as well as responsibilities of each department. And it also includes DHERD, which I think also needs to be consulted in this measure. With that being said, we will move this out as an HD1 to further the conversation and to allow for the author to work with the appropriate agencies to figure out what will work for the Department of Education as well as DHERD. With that being said, we'll also break out the appropriation amount. We'll be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. And we'll include in the committee report the request for the next committee to look at the deadline of implementation, which is 2024 and 2025 school year. That may be a little tight for the actual implementation, and it also contradicts some of the other planning goals that we've set for this Farm to School program. Also, we'll be looking at the DHERD section and seeing if DOE would be better off doing the hiring process. And so with all of that being said, Chair's recommendation is going to move this out as a HD1. Any comments, questions, concerns, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 248, Chair elects to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. We have our full committee here. Any representatives voting no? Any representatives voting with reservations? Chair, your measure is adopted.
Okay, congratulations, everyone. This now concludes the first hearing of the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems for the 2023 legislative session. Mahalo for all of our committee members being here and our testifiers as well. This meeting will now be adjourned.